o'clock, right? Okay, welcome to Speakers Bureau. That's the first time I've ever been exactly on time anywhere, I think. Welcome to everyone to the Speakers Bureau for the month of, this is October, right?
Yes.
We're going to have a Speakers Bureau in October. And we have a full complement of participants. Whether we have a full complement in the audience or not, we will see as time wears on. I see we're only at 21, but maybe we're 22 with two of us in this room. And of course, anxious to have qualified speakers in the audience to make sure they will be there to vote in this participation. I think it's only fair for me in the event of truth in advertising that I show you that I'm being just like a TV nightly news guy, because it's the first time I ever ran Speakers Bureau wearing a coat and tie, shorts, and tennis shoes. But I try to fit into the venue here, try to look professional anyway. So anyway, we're having some fun. I will later share with you, is Roxann, are you here? Anyway, we have two people seeking their QS tonight.
Yes.
We'll share with you the order. There, Roxann is here. And I don't know whether you want to, maybe you should just follow up my commercial for your husband's special event. I did mention it earlier, but maybe we should talk more about it after more people get here so that there'll be greater. And if I'm not mistaken, I did send it out to QSs and a whole lot of the QS attendees, so maybe close to 100 people got it, and encourage everyone to forward it to all those who think they should be informed before they vote, rather than to walk in there and just pick every other number and vote that way. But anyway, I know he doesn't. I'll just speak ahead of time, saying how outstanding he has done. Good job he's done. I know Sunny said she's seen it. And he does a very good job, an unbiased manner, giving us an education and helping us to pick out ways to choose. I will go over the order of the day, and the first speaker, I'll have Dan speak. He was hoping not to have to be speaking at 4 in the morning instead of 3:30 or whatever it is. He said it's 3 in the morning there. And so Dan Magill would be first, followed by Michael Olsen, and he will be second. And we will have that workshop or that discussion about storytelling will be the final event by Roxann Andersen, our longtime QS, longtime member of Speakers Bureau. And I'm sure we'll have some announcements from Jose later toward the end, so that we will get to that too. And remind everybody that next month's meeting is going to be November the 4th. So, and right now I'm looking for some volunteers. We have some space in the program for QSs to make presentations, and for others, if you're working with someone now toward getting their QS, we will get to that and be able to, right now, I can schedule somebody if they know that they wish to go next month. We've had some people with rather hesitant to seek their QS on Zoom, but this is dragged on so long, you may not have many other options for a while. Okay, our first speaker comes to us from all the way across the pond, all the way across from London, England, and he is going to be the first time we've had anyone seek their QS from outside the district. He has jumped through all the hoops, checked off all the boxes, and had been to enough meetings in fact, actually spoken at least a couple of our meetings of our Speakers Bureau, but he has been attending Club 797 and joined officially Club 797. So that makes Dan officially ready to go for his qualified speaker role. And we look forward to his workshop today and his explanation of how to bring some humor into your speech. And let me see. Help me, I'm not funny is the name of his speech. And we have a timer going to give us some recognition of time. If not, we can do that from here. I get to show off in fact, why don't I be the timer? Because I get to show off my virtual backgrounds that I got through the help of Bob Palmer, I think. So with that, I will go without any more conversation. I'll get rid of my green background. And I thought I had gotten rid of it, but we'll just go that way. Okay. And with that, Our first person seeking their qualified speaker status is Dan Magill here from London. Help me, I'm not funny. Help me, I'm not funny. Dan Magill, let's hear it. And everybody mute, please, if that's what he wishes. Some people don't, but if that's what he wishes.
Yeah, sure, mute, thank you. I want you to imagine you're in the grand final of the World Championships for public speaking. The stage is set and you're on it, about to give the speech of your life. It might be about race, religion, politics, tragedy, disability, even your old school teacher. But there you are on stage, ready to go. But I've just got one question for you before you start. How many jokes are you going to tell? A Toastmaster, Giovanni Cigar, did some research. He studied all the World Championship winning speeches over the last 30 years. And one of the most common elements he found in those speeches was humour. Of all the winning speeches over 30 years, the average number of laughs each speech got was 16. That's 16 laughs in a 7-minute speech. That's more than 2 laughs every minute. And some of these speeches deal with quite serious topics. Not one winner in 30 years had no humour. So if you're going with a speech that's got no humour, you're not going to be standing on that World Championship winning stage. And the lowest number of laughs, in fact, in a winning speech was 7, which is still quite a big amount. So have a think about the last speech that you gave. How many times did the audience laugh, or at least smile? Or how many times did you at least attempt to make them laugh or smile? So why so much humour? Why is it so important? Well, firstly, I don't think it matters what we're talking about, whether it's a technical speech, an entertaining speech, or a more serious one. Your audience, they want to enjoy it. They want to be entertained no matter what. And when you can use humour to add a light touch to a heavy topic, then your audience are going to feel so much more relaxed and comfortable and engaged with what you're saying. And they'll be willing to go to those darker places because they know that you can bring them back to the light too. Secondly, I think adding humour is a skill, of course. Being able to make an audience laugh is not easy. It stands to reason that the best speakers, they're going to want to show you how they can use that tool of humour effectively. So that's why we see so much of it in these higher level speeches. The comedian, who I'm sure you're all aware of, Ricky Gervais, he said, people don't come out and tell you the value of pi to 13 decimal places. They tell you a joke. And that's how we know how intelligent they are. So whatever our message is, whatever we want our audience to take away, humour is always going to be one of the most effective tools to help us achieve those objectives. I remember when I was 10 and I was on a school trip and we were on the bus back from wherever we'd been, probably the candle making factory. We always went to the candle making factory. Our school prepared us well for the real world. We couldn't read, write or spell, but if anyone ever wanted a quick candle, we were there. Anyway, we're on the bus and I'm sat with my friend, Michael. And there are 2 girls in front and they're leaning over the seats and we're all chatting and we're taking it in turns to talk about what we want to be when we're older. Now, Michael, he wants to be a doctor. Show off. Leah wanted to be a vet. Nice. And Geraldine, she wanted to be Madonna. But when it got to me, I didn't know. I really didn't know. I mean, I wasn't completely ready to take candle making off the table, but on the whole, I wasn't sure. But I can remember clearly Geraldine looking at me and saying, I think you'll become a comedian. You're so funny. You always make us laugh, even when you don't try to. But I fell in love on the spot. Not with Geraldine. God, no. She immediately burst into a horrific acoustic version of Vogue. But no, I fell in love with the idea of being a comedian. But fast forward a few years, and I was a shy, nervous teenager. Fast forward another 10 years, and I was doing everything I could to avoid speaking in public. And 10 years after that, I was at the point where I would leave jobs because they asked me to give presentations, and the fear was too big. And I'm not going to add out on any other years because it's starting to add up. But 3 years ago, I walked into a Toastmasters meeting for the first time. And I didn't have much clue what Toastmasters was about. If I was being honest, it looked a little bit like a cult. But I certainly had no intention of speaking. I took my seat and I watched 3 excellent speeches. And during the break, a lady came up to me. She said, "Can I interest you in a topic?" Now I agreed. I assumed it was some kind of delicious chocolate bar. If you were going to set up your own YouTube channel, what would it be about? And that one goes to our guest, Dan. What? I don't have a clear memory of what happened over the next few minutes. I can picture being stood on stage, absolutely terrified. I remember I did speak. I remember the audience were laughing. And I remembered I didn't only sign up to become a member that night. I agreed to compete in the next week's humorous speech and table topics contest. And that night, I realized it was humor that had finally helped me to start finding more confidence. It was humor that I'd used to help myself relax. I'd used humor to tell a story, and I'd used humor to engage the audience. And I won both contests a week after joining. I mean, there were only 3 of us competing. One went over time and was disqualified in both contests. Now that takes some doing. And the other was called Dan too. And you know what Toastmasters judges are like. They get very easily confused. But within a week of starting my public speaking journey, I'd already realized the power of humor. The area contest didn't go so well. There were 4 of us competing in both contests. I think I managed to finish a combined 10th. But that didn't matter because I'd started my journey and I was desperate to learn as much as I could for the following year. And the next year, I won the whole competition to district level. And that was amazing and I was thrilled, and it's one of the best things. But of course, there's also a lot of luck in that, and there's personal opinions of Toastmaster judges, which is always a concern. But with the grand title of District Humorous Speaking Champion, I thought, okay, now I'm going to go and try that stand-up comedy that I so longed to do when I was young. And that's what I did. I went along to a comedy night in London. I did 5 minutes comedy, and it was an absolute disaster. I basically delivered a Toastmaster speech. There were no punchlines, no jokes, no laughs. And I came away feeling pretty depressed. But the more I thought about it, and I thought about what others had done differently on the night, and I thought about what I would need to change about my own delivery and my own thought process, the more things started to fit into place. And I started to do as much stand-up comedy as I could every night. And the laughs started to come. Earlier this year, I went to Calgary in Canada and I did 5 nights of stand-up comedy just every night with some top comedians there. And I realized that just like with anything in life, the trick is to practice. Don't be put off when it goes badly. It has to go badly for you to have any chance of improving. I think if you can stand on stage and try and make people laugh, be that in a speech or a stand-up or whatever you're doing, if you can do that and fail miserably, tell jokes to absolute silence, but remain calm and confident, then congratulations, you've just mastered one of the hardest things to do in public speaking. And that's what we're all here to do. So just keep going back, just keep practicing. What have I learned and what can I pass on to you today? Well, I think let's start with comic inspiration. So many people say to me, they say, I'm just not funny. I don't have any funny stories. I can't think of any funny ideas. Or I'm giving a speech that wouldn't have any humor in it. And I think that's just nonsense because, of course, we all have funny stories and funny ideas. So I'd say start challenging yourself to give humorous speeches more often. It doesn't have to be in a contest, just any time. Just try and give a humorous speech if it's not something you're used to doing. Then challenge yourself to take a more serious speech and work out where humor could fit into that, because there will always be somewhere where you can lighten those heavy moments, or even if it's a more technical speech, there'll be humor that you can find within that. And you'll be amazed at how quickly the ideas start coming. 2 years ago, I remember my friend called me up and said, have you got any ideas for your humorous speech contest yet? And this was the second time I was about to enter. And I didn't have any ideas, but I thanked her for reminding me and said that I'd start thinking about it. And I sat down and I switched on a movie. It was called I, Tonya. You might have seen it. It's about the figure skater, Tonya Harding, who allegedly kneecapped her rival so that she could win. So I watched that movie and I was thinking, okay, I need to come up with an idea because I'd just had that phone call. And 9 months later, I won the district championship with a speech about how I tried to sabotage the previous year's district champion so I could steal his crown. So I think we just have to start looking for ideas, and they're everywhere. Conflict. Conflict is a huge factor in creating humor when you speak. Always look for conflict in a situation. In the sabotage speech that I just spoke about, the conflict was the juxtaposition between the Toastmaster organization, which is good and has high moral values, and me, an unscrupulous Toastmaster hell-bent on doing whatever it took to win the contest. And that's where the humor in that speech played out. If you look at comedy on TV, you'll see the same thing. You'll see humor playing out where there's either internal or external conflict. Probably a lot of you will have seen Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David constantly comes into actual conflict with people. Every episode sees him getting into arguments or with different people, and that's where the comedy is in that show. Something like The Office, maybe the conflict is more internal. It's a delusional conflict between who Michael Scott thinks he is, a successful boss who everyone admires and respects, and reality, which is that nobody respects him and people laugh at him rather than with him. So find the conflict and you'll find the humor. Conflict is always what allows comedy to play out. Next, your audience. And this is across the board, for not just humor, for anything, but particularly humor. Always consider your audience and how they might differ from the one you spoke to yesterday. In stand-up comedy, a joke can be a huge hit one day and exactly the same joke can bomb the next day. And it's going to be the same with humor in speeches. A joke will live or die depending on how appropriate it is for that very specific audience. I remember winning a division contest in the humorous speech a couple of years ago, and it was the most enjoyable speech I'd ever given. The audience were laughing from the start to the end, and I came off stage buzzing. 2 years later, I flew to Vancouver. Oh, 2 years, 2 days. 2 days later, I flew to Vancouver, and I went along to one of their Toastmaster clubs to give that same speech. And he's saying, "Oh, we're so excited to have you." And I got there, it was a room packed full of young students who were learning English as a foreign language. And they were all there eagerly waiting for me, the expert, to come in and teach them. They had pens and paper ready, waiting for the pearls of wisdom that I was about to give them. And 7 minutes of complete silence later, with no notes taken whatsoever, I just slumped back into my seat. But this was the same speech to what was technically the same organization, with just 2 days in between. Now, they didn't know who the previous winner of the UK contest was. Why would they? So all my jokes about him were lost. They didn't know Toastmasters quite well enough to get references to general evaluations and jokes I made about boring workshops, and not this one. They didn't even really understand anything I was saying. They just got used to the Canadian accent, which obviously takes some doing, and there I was with my British accent. So always consider your audience every single time. Find out as much as you can about them beforehand, and don't be tempted to push ahead with something just because it worked last time. Delivery. With humor, delivery is obviously absolutely critical. You need to get used to playing with your timing, your energy, pauses, and vocal variety. Here's an example of a joke I did a few months back. Now, don't get excited. It's not the best joke, but here it is. I'm on a diet. The problem is I eat too much pizza. I eat too much pizza, I get fat. I get fat, I get depressed. I get depressed, I eat more pizza. I call it the dominoes effect. Now, okay, I know it's not the best joke, but there's a rhythm to the delivery of that joke. I eat too much pizza, pause. I eat too much pizza, I get fat. I almost play out the domino effect as I'm going through the joke, and then a pause before I call it the dominoes effect. Now, without any work on the delivery of that joke, and maybe a new Toastmaster who's trying to put some humor into a speech would just deliver it something like, I eat too much pizza, I get fat, I get fat, I get depressed, I eat more pizza, I call it the dominoes effect. And everything there is lost from that. So we can see how everything is in the delivery. That sabotage speech that I won district with, there was a point where I'd done all my sabotaging and the victim was on stage and things weren't going well for him. So he starts panicking and falling back on old jokes. Why did the Toastmaster cross the road? To make full use of the space? Why did he go back to the other side? Because he didn't like his new pathway. Again, not the best. But you can see how adding energy, adding movement, adding some vocal variety and a sense of urgency all add to how successful that joke is going to be. And again, it could have been just delivered like this. He started panicking and falling back on old material. He started telling us jokes like, why did the Toastmaster cross the road? To make full use of the space. Why did he go back to the other side? Because he didn't like his new pathway. And it might still get a laugh, but it doesn't have anything like the same impact. Props. Props can be hugely effective when we're dealing with humor. I think they can have fourfold effects on jokes. So firstly, a prop can be the joke itself. Secondly, they can help to explain a joke. And third, they can give your audience a surprise laugh. I think the best one is probably that sometimes an audience will laugh just at the actual madness of the fact that you've gone to the time and expense to set up the prop. If you have a watch, I'll put the link in, but if you have a watch of the district speech that I gave, you'll see how many different props I use within that speech. I had a framed picture of the previous champion so that people could recognize him. I wore a hat, there was glasses as a disguise, and at one point I even managed to use my shoe as a telephone. Always be thinking of how you can get a prop into a humorous speech. Probably not so much in other speeches. I think it's very difficult to effectively use props in a more serious speech, even though you might use some humor. I think they can be a distraction, but in a humorous speech, always try and use props. Bit of a recap. Comic inspiration is everywhere. Start looking and you'll start finding. Always look for conflict in the situation. Where there's conflict, there's comedy. Know your audience. Work on your delivery, then work on it some more and keep working on it. And always consider a good prop. There's nothing more effective than a good prop. So I want to finish by asking you to imagine you're in the grand final of the World Championships of Public Speaking. Again. The stage is set and you're on it, about to give the speech of your life. Except it's not really the speech of your life because you're not too fussed about winning. What you're craving more than winning is the sound of the audience laughing. And afterwards, people will come up to you and tell you how their favourite bit was that joke that you told. And they'll ask you if you can come to their club or their organisation and make their people laugh. Because God knows everyone could do with a good laugh at the moment. And you're going to be the person who can do that. You'll be the one who can put a smile on people's faces. And there's not a lot in life that's more fulfilling than that. Thank you.
All right. I got some smiles out of that, that's for sure. And I don't know how we didn't get to hear everybody's laughter, but that's the price we pay for Zoom. But there is some rewards to it, and certainly having you here from all the way from Great Britain is one of those rewards. Now, as my role is to ask from our QSs first, we'll start with them with any thoughts, suggestions, additions that they would like to give for him. I don't know if Dan heard this story, but once upon a time, Speakers Bureau was so, I don't know what, I guess stringent, is that people making suggestions were not allowed to say anything positive. The only thing they could say, so you had to be pretty strong to walk up there and know that for 10 minutes you'll be basically roasted, I guess. And then hopefully some of those people got all that roast, they still got voted in. So let me see some hands. I'm going to put it on a different view so I can see any QSs who have an addition. Yes, Michael, I see you.
So you caught a bus now and again, did you? One of the things that we have to be careful of is that when we're talking colloquial English, particularly to foreigners, we can lose them just like that. But you were funny, you were interesting, you were very informative. I have one question. In your left hand, what was so interesting that you had to keep looking at it? You're muted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, only a clicker that I was using to go through notes, but no, not very interesting, really. I certainly didn't need to look at it.
No, but it was in fact slightly distracting.
Yeah.
Because as someone watching you, they're thinking, what the heck? And then when you brought out the candy, I thought, oh, perhaps he's got some more candy there. I wonder what he's got. There was nothing. So it was a sort of an anticlimax from that point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, what you had to say was absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Well done.
Okay, and we are looking for another. Oh, I see Daryl has made it, so he'll be ready to introduce Michael. Do we have some other questions?
Comments.
Comments, yeah, suggestions? All right, I'm looking for hands that might be in the air. And I don't see, make sure you unmute yourself in the interest of efficiency. Well.
Hey, Dan, it's Sunny.
Nice to meet
Always enjoy hearing you speak. I love the blue background with the white shirt in front of it, and your lighting's pretty good too. A little on the dark side, but we can still see you clearly lit, so that's great. The one thing I thought was interesting was I don't recall hearing any humor at the start of your speech. You started with the facts about speeches, and I think it might have been a little more sort of engaging if you had started with something funny. So it felt like it was a little bit, considering it's a speech about humor, it felt like it was a little bit ways in before we had our first laugh. But I did have several good laughs during your speech. You know, it just always amazes me how you can do humor over Zoom. It's something I am not comfortable with at all. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought on suggesting on that was a little distracting, that thing in your hand, that you might have had someone there to do it for you. You just kind of look at them and they do it, except you got to find somebody willing to be up at 3 in the morning.
You know, I've had that feedback too before, because I use my clicker to advance slides when I'm for my notes, and so I'm almost tempted to mention that that's what it is, because I get that feedback all the time too. What was in your hand? And that's really all it was. It's the clicker to advance my notes.
Okay, do I see another QS with a thought in addition to our conversation and help for suggestions for Dan? And I can't really see the entire audience, so I have to keep flashing back and forth. Okay, well, I'm going to I'll call on someone who can't say no. Connie, you want to respond?
One thing I appreciated, Dan, is you're showing those of us who haven't had too much experience presenting on Zoom how you can use Zoom even though you can't move around on a stage, I saw you lean in when you had a point to make. And I saw great use of facial expressions. You can't use as much of your body language, but facial expressions were great. And then the fact that you would lean in as you shared something with us. So I think anytime we can see somebody give a good example of delivery on Zoom, it helps those of us that are still trying to learn this.
One of the things that impressed me, and that is, might be in content, and that is that we don't hear many presentations on how to improve humor in your speeches. And oftentimes people giving their QS qualifying speech are interested in some dynamic presentation about something, some topic or something. But to have an instructional video, just like we would have once you are a QS, to come back and give us instruction, like doing a better speaker series and that sort of thing. I thought that was impressive, to take this as a topic on how to help us at humor. We all know that humor is important, but know that it takes 16 times. I do have to share one story that was identical to your story, and that is, I remember one year that I gave a speech that went on to win the district humorous speech contest. And I gave the exact speech to a club that will go unmentioned and got 0 laughs. And to this day, I accuse them of not having a funny bone, but it is part of the audience not just getting whatever humor, that style of humor, but the judges liked it. So it can happen. And so the lesson there, of course, is that don't necessarily throw it all out if it didn't work, because it might work better somewhere else. Do I see any other suggestions? We still have a little more time for feedback before we actually have you vote. And we will have you vote by chat. I guess we did this before, right, Sonny? And they just sent the word to you, yes or no. And we'll, if you're only supposed to be a QS and you're voting, but it takes a 2/3 vote, and she will collect those results and get them to me, and they will be, our rules are that it is announced with the speaker themselves find out within 24 hours, their coach finds within 24 hours, or mentor, and then we will make sure that that information does come out later on. But those 2 people have to find out before anybody else finds out.
So does it go to Sunny?
So it goes to Sonny. Is that true, Sonny?
Sonny or Michael? I don't know.
Michael's here, but Michael's been doing it all along. But we can do it either way.
I will put up the poll in just 10 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Or whenever, are we ready to vote?
We should
Sonny,
be
who's the
voting
poll
now
go to?
before we go on.
Oh, there's Michael.
Yeah, I've been here. So who's the poll go to, Sonny, or do you just want to vote in chat?
Sure.
It goes to everyone, but only the QSs should vote.
Okay, so it'll be a standard poll like at a club meeting, and then it will get back to you, and then you can get that to Michael and I.
Yes.
Okay.
But Sonny, we have no control over who votes, so that's a bit of an issue.
Then we'll just filter out those who are illegitimate. You want to be illegitimate, go ahead and vote if you're not a QS.
Yes, we can tell who's voting, Michael, so then Tom can only count the ones that are QSs.
Yeah.
Are we voting now?
Well, yes, let's
Are we
go ahead and
doing
vote
this
now.
verbally or through a vote through the chat?
Okay, just you vote on, if you're a
There we
QS, vote yes or no. Yes.
Yes.
Remember, it takes
Okay.
2/3, so,
That'll do.
and remember that I'm voting for 2, I guess. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, we are ready with that. We can go on to, I see our mentor coach for Michael is here, and I will then give him in control to unmute himself and make that introduction for our next person seeking their QS tonight. Darryl Zeller.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you going to chime him too?
The individual I'm going to introduce is a gentleman that I met about 5 years ago. When he moved to Riverside, he contacted Tom Jameson for some strange reason. It was Tom, to see if there was a Toastmasters club in the vicinity that would welcome someone with his credentials. He did not want to join a club under false pretenses, so he told Tom that about 5 years previously, he had been introduced to Toastmasters while he was in Chuckawalla Valley State Prison. Shortly after he was introduced to the club, he was transferred to a facility that did not have a Toastmasters club. With this information, Tom told him that I had been very involved with the Toastmasters clubs in prisons, so he suggested that Michael contact me. But when Michael contacted me, we welcomed him into the Finding Fairy Toastmasters Club, and Michael attended regularly. He served in many different leadership roles and represented our club in multiple speech contests. I'm happy to say that Michael is a friend. Now tonight he's going to present us with a message, something that I firmly believe in. He'll be talking about an issue which he has very personal experience. He's not going to talk about something in theory because he has walked the walk. In fact, he is continuing to walk the walk. So help me welcome Michael Olsen as he tells us about that monster under the bed. Michael. Unmute yourself, Michael.
Better? What was that? You sit upright in bed. It's the middle of the night. It's pitch black. You know you heard a sound. You reach over to your lamp and turn the switch, and nothing happens. It must be another California blackout. But you need to know what that was. But it sounded like it came from under your bed. So you crawl to the edge, you peer down underneath, and you're met with two glowing red orbs and a fearsome beast with a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. You have a monster under your bed. That monster is me. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to any guests that have joined us. With Halloween fast approaching, I'm wondering if maybe you thought of Halloween costumes and scary movies, or as I do, I think of fun things like the movie Monsters, Inc., where the monsters scared little children in order to generate power for their world. But as much as I love Halloween, what I came to talk about is the monsters as defined by the state. Those monsters are known as villains, criminals, lowlifes, miscreants, violent offenders, and eventually ex-convicts. I know these monsters. I am one. I am an ex-convict. At one point in time, I had it all. I had the house, a wife, 3 children, a great career. But I also found gambling and became addicted to it. And I let my character slide in order to do this. Eventually, it controlled much of my life. I went gambling one night, stayed out all night, and I lost my entire paycheck. But in the morning, the early hours, my wife called me and said, if you don't come home with the money for the week's expenses, don't come home at all. I had had only 2 hours sleep in 2 days, and I made the stupid decision to try and steal the money to make up for my losses. I ended up in prison, where I spent 2,281 days, slightly under 6.5 years. And I am here to tell you it is the most negative experience you can imagine. I sat there in total despair. I was not going to get out until I was 53 years old. I had destroyed my family, my career, and I had no idea how I would survive in the future. Until something unexpected happened. However, I'm not going to tell you that right now. I'm going to make you wait a little longer. Right now, I'm going to tell you that the reason that this monster climbed out from under the bed is to tell you how the definition of me being a monster by the state has made re-entry back into society extremely difficult. See, society believes whatever the state tells them. Rental owners sure did, because I could not find a place to rent. I had to live as a homeless man for the first year that I was out of prison. Employers certainly believe it. I have a college degree and more than 20 years of experience as an accountant, but I can't find the lowliest position within my field. My first job was at a factory where I would clean the nastiest chemicals you can think of out of shipping containers, reconditioning them and resell them to chemical companies. And yet, I had to talk to the foreman for 9 consecutive weeks before they would offer me an opportunity. I must be a fearsome beast indeed. Yet if you asked people that really know me, they would tell you that I'm a man of honor and kindness. Excuse me, but you said you were that monster under my bed. Yes, I know, but I came out from under your bed so that I might be able to help improve the lives of other monsters. Whoa! How do you think you're going to do that? Well, that's really quite easy. I want to help create a societal paradigm change. A paradigm is where the concepts of reality and the practices of how to do something becomes a way of life. For instance, let's say that you are in your job and you come up with this great idea for how to do something better. You go to your boss and you tell them, "Hey boss, let's do this great new way." Boss says no. You ask him why. Well, it's the way it's always been done. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a paradigm. But a paradigm can be changed, but only if there's a profound change in the perception of reality. And all of our reality is subject to the limitations and distortions of our socially conditioned nature, based on what we've been shown and what we've been told. So what happens if that is so distorted that it doesn't match truth? Okay, Mr. Monster, what do you suggest we do? Well, first, we have to accept that the current system is a failure. Here's an example. The state of California puts out a number which says the recidivism, or the rate at which people return to prison after they've been released, is 70%. That's right. Out of every 100 people that are released, 70 will return back to prison. A 70% rate of return will make a business person salivate, but as a society who pays $75,000 per year per inmate, that doesn't really add up to a very good system. Why is this number so high? Think about this. If you take the people from the mean streets that had a large part to do with why they turned into monsters in the first place, and you put them into an institution, but you allow them to create the same environment in the institution that was out on the streets, you do nothing to change that environment or how people think, how do you expect that they're going to change when they leave? The environment must change before we can expect people to change. Here's a program that reduced that 70% recidivism to only 8%. That's a significant change. You remember earlier when I mentioned that I encountered something unexpected? I was sitting in despair in my dorm room, this really negative environment, and somebody offered to show me to a meeting that I jumped on because then I can get out of the negativity. So I went to this meeting. It happened to be a Toastmasters meeting. I felt so comfortable because it was positive and it was focused on the future that I joined. And the first speech that I gave, the evaluator told me, you have an amazing ability to paint a picture with words. I knew at that moment what it was that I needed to do. I was going to become a professional speaker and writer and paint those pictures with words, and I was going to help people with them. Help people to overcome their addictions. Help people to overcome the destruction that they've made in their life. That moment created a spark. And even though I spent 5 years waiting to get out before I could find another Toastmasters club, it helped spark a reevaluation of my character, and I started to correct that. It helped me know that when I got out, I would get into a Toastmasters program, and I attended every single week, even though I was homeless. I have been training for 5 years to become a professional speaker. I have learned to control my gambling addiction, and I'm writing a book so that I can help other people to control their addictions. And I have studied internet marketing so that I can use those decades of business consulting and accounting experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not that monster under your bed. I am simply a human being. Admittedly, I made a huge mistake, but I owned up to my failures. I've made changes. And now I have crawled out from that dark and hidden place to stand out here in the fearful light of day. You know, it's funny how a film created to entertain children can have such a powerful idea within it. I want to take you back to that movie, Monsters, Inc. again. Those monsters scared little children for profit. Hello, Disney. It was the way things were done. It was their paradigm. Until they discovered that there was more power in laughter and joy than there was in fear and screams. They had discovered a new perception of reality, a new truth. We, as citizens of our society, have a paradigm to change as well. We need to stop seeing that once a person has gone bad, they will forever be bad. This is a distorted perception of reality. The fact is that for us to change that paradigm, we are going to have to tell the truth over and over again until the distortion dissolves away and the reality is revealed. I have heard a saying that crisis reveals character. And I believe it. It's true. However, it only reveals character as it is in that moment. Character can be corrected. It can be forged in the fires of distress, but only if it's with a creative force that is providing a positive direction in its remaking. Toastmasters. The tools are in your hands. Join me in the process of changing the paradigm and helping change people's lives. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Michael. I happen to agree with him that we need to do a lot of changes. Rehabilitation is possible. And Michael is one example of somebody who did get rehabilitated. And I'm thankful that he did find Toastmasters to help him on that way. Now, do we have any comments from any of the QSs? Any hands raised?
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful story. Everybody loves a good redemption story. I love your authenticity. You made us feel your experience, especially in communicating the roller coaster of emotions you went through. You have an important message. And I am grateful to have experienced some of it. I wish you best on your journey and your destination. And I look forward to hearing more from you. I really don't have anything to add. The number one thing is the authenticity, and that's really relevant in times like this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, who wants to go next? Suzanne, are you raising your hand? No. Okay,
Karen Lucas, and then me.
okay, Karen.
Thank you very much, Daryl. That was an incredible speech, Michael. That actually moved me immensely. You had that authenticity and just your genuine raw self with your path, your journey, your experience. You also gave us a real understanding of how truly great we are at locking people up in our society. And if you wanted to connect even more with your listeners, consider maybe comparing and contrasting other societies that may have gotten it a little bit better or maybe a little more right. I know there are the models in Sweden and in some of the Nordic countries that we can look to where they are much more forgiving with respect to character, and that people are malleable in how they can change and what it is that allows them to change. I think this message is desperately needed. And I, for one, am thrilled that you are using the value of Toastmasters to advocate for such a noble and worthy cause. Thank you for your message.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And now Michael.
Michael, thank you so much. You've answered so many questions that I've having heard you speak a lot, but I also was moved, and I think the story is super powerful. And I'm so glad you're not at Chuckawalla, because there's been over 1,000 COVID cases there.
No.
Not a safe or good place for anybody to be for any reason. And so I'm pleased that you're with us in District 12. My one suggestion would be is, I might have missed this because it's easy to get distracted on Zoom. How did you overcome all this? How did you find a way to turn your life around? Was there a mentor, a teacher? What was the hook that made the difference that helped you on the journey so that it could be more universal? That's my only thing. This is a story that everyone needs to hear. It's so powerful. And especially, I mean, I think you hit all the points, and I'm thrilled to have heard your speech tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Michael, if you want to know the answer to those questions, you'll have to buy the book.
Yeah, of course. And I'll buy it if you sign it. And great first name. I wish I respelled mine.
Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to be next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
Michael, I was very impressed by your speech. There were a couple things I thought you did extremely well. The monster, you really painted a picture of what we probably think of you, and that maybe you're not such as bad of a monster, and an ex-con and a felon, well, you know, maybe they're not so bad, and maybe they're should be given a chance. I think it is an important message, and I would encourage you to go out and give this. I have a suggestion, and I think it's similar to Michael's, but it's a little bit more specific. So let me give you the 3 areas where I think you could do an improvement. When you were at the gambling place and decided to rob or try to steal it, you gave us the conclusion in about 2 seconds. It would be helpful to see what was going through your mind at that time, so that I'm going to call it an internal story, whereas you gave us the external story. It would be helpful to see the internal story. What was going through your mind? Then when you were in jail, you talked about negativity. It was negative. But I didn't see the description of what you meant by negativity. It was just negative. And I think that would be much stronger if I could feel and see what you meant by negativity. And then when you join Toastmasters, you just join Toastmasters. What was going through your mind I would like to see the internal story. And I think hearing the internal story would be even more powerful. But I applaud you. Thank you for coming. And I hope you do go out and give that message.
Thank you so much. And yes, the plan is to have multiple speeches that have to do with telling the different parts of what you're saying. What was going on with me in the gambling process? What was going on in the prison? How did I make those changes? What spurred the change? That kind of thing. So there will be multiple messages.
Okay. Somebody else want to go?
Yeah. Hey, Daryl, I will, if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Jeremiah. I enjoyed your speech. I enjoyed your topic and everything, and I am a huge supporter of the prison program, especially over there at Chuckawalla. And I think that's very, I think you're one of the great success stories and one of the reasons why it's so good that District 12 supports that program every year.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I felt, while I appreciate the authenticity, I felt a lot of disjointness between the movement of your speech from section to section and kind of going back and forth. And I would have loved to have seen just a little bit more tightness in those transitions and kind of running your stories in order. So that way we could kind of follow along. I think you kind of jumped a little bit for me on that. And that's the one thing I saw, but I think your authenticity really set you, it really made up for that because we were really invested in who you were. And it's such a very strong story. But I think that would help as you're going along, just improve this speech. And I think a lot of that could be is because you could really make this speech. This could be an hour-long keynote speech, and you're trying to fit this thing into a 15 to 20-minute speech. And that is the challenge sometimes with this QS process, is trying to fill the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes, but not fill it with too much, but also not too little. So there's a very fine line there. And so I think that's something that as you progress and as you do this, you'll be able to maybe start really refine those, but really focus in on those key points and really make those short little 15-minute educational portions, which will make it a lot stronger. So, but great job and very authentic. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I don't see any green card yet, so we don't think we're out of time yet. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
We do have time, not a problem.
Okay. Well, since nobody's raising their hand right now that I can see anyway.
You can allow, now you can, if there's no other QSs with comments, and any other member of the audience they can comment also.
Okay. Do we have anybody else that wants to make a comment? Well,
okay.
Well, Michael, I'd just like to mention that part of what I saw was I would have liked seen you or heard you go ahead and talk about, bring it back in that recidivism, 8% for those who went through the Toastmasters program compared to 70% overall. I think that would turn around and add a lot of more impact because it's what you started out. You saw the Toastmasters and you stayed with it, even though you were away from it for 5 years. That seed remained in your mind and you came out and you joined Toastmasters, and literally you have made a name for yourself in the district, and I believe it is a very good name. So I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Well then, Tom, I guess I'll return it back to you.
Okay, all right, thank you. I have some comments at this point. So I did want to mention a couple of things, and that is, first of all, I'll preface the whole thing with I'm about as law and order as you can get, but there's also some studies that show that the importance of penal punishment, of using the system as a punishment, is it's more important to have surety of catching the criminal than it is to severity. And so if we could spend some of those, and one of the things you might mention is to extrapolate and figure out how many hundreds of millions of dollars we would spend by having an 8% recidivism rate instead of a 70% recidivism rate. You could spend that time and money on something that is in the title of the prison system, but doesn't appear to be in their goal, and that is the word rehabilitation. They they glorify the program by mentioning rehabilitation, but they don't do very much about rehabilitation, training people with skills so the way they come out, they don't give them $100 in a new suit and expect them to succeed. The other thing, one little comment I did have, and that was, they had a point in your speech where you mentioned people can do one thing and help others, and there's a rhythm to using three things. You might have figured out a third thing to add in there that would be good. And I don't recall right exactly where it was in the speech, but I have a word that I use in talking about Speakers Bureau and the QSs, and it's not a very complimentary word, but it's a word I love, and I can't think of a better way to state it. But I think Speakers Bureau would benefit by having you in its stable of speakers, and that meaning that group of people that can go out into the world and share a particular story. And I think you would have that, a wonderful story. I'm just saying that says, if you're going to get up and give a speech, the very least you can do is have something to say. You definitely have something to say.
Yeah.
You definitely have a message that should be shared out in the world. And we would love to have you aboard. And with that,
Thank you.
we will be waiting for a vote. And we will go on then to our next speaker. We'll do a brief introduction of someone who has known me long enough to be able to say that she wasn't really all that impressed with my presentation the first time she heard me 25 years ago or so. But we've been in the same club for all that time. And I certainly understood her understanding of my skills. And so our next speaker is an expert, the closest thing I know to a real expert in dealing with storytelling. And I've heard her add so much to everyone in the audience's presentation skills by telling us how to add stories to your speeches. And we all know that's effective. Along with humor adding to your speeches, we'll all walk out of this room tonight better at storytelling and adding humor to our speeches. Roxann Andersen shares 3 ways to give your story more impact. 3 ways to give your story more impact. Roxann Andersen.
Roxann, you're muted.
This will be so much better with it unmuted. I want you to think of one of your favorite movies. One that kept you on the edge of your seat. You were rooting for the hero. You didn't know whether he was going to make it. There was a huge obstacle to overcome, and it had your rapt attention. Do you remember the message that the story conveyed? Because when we tell stories within our speeches, the point is to convey a certain message. And when people remember the story, they also remember the message. Now, here's the thing. The more impact the story has, the better they will remember the message. Usually the stories that really hold our attention have a huge obstacle that needs to be overcome. I've used the word obstacle, but if you wanted the literary term, it's called conflict. Or the way I prefer to think of it is tension. Tension is like a rubber band. If you put a little bit of tension on it, you get a little bit of impact. More tension, more impact. You put a whole lot of tension and you get a whole lot of impact. So what we want to look at tonight is how do you add impact to the stories that you tell. Think of your signature story, one that you want to develop really well and use again and again, and let's look at ways that you might add impact to it so that the message will stick better. There are 3 places that you can add impact. The first one is setting, the second one is the characters, and the third one is the plot. So we're going to start with the setting. Setting is just a word for where and when the story takes place. So to illustrate this, I want to use the example of the movie Apollo 13. Apollo 13 has this great setting. It is set in an America that is very patriotic. We had been behind Russia in the space race, but then Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong landed on the moon and walked on the moon, and suddenly we were out in front. So there was that going, but also there was the memory in everybody's recent memory of the Apollo 8 mission. The capsule had re-entered our atmosphere. When it landed, the hatch stuck. A fire erupted, and the astronomers, not the astronomers, the astronauts who were in there all died in the fire. Everybody remembered that. And now you had Apollo 13, and 13 is an inherently unlucky number. All of that creates the setting. And the more the obstacles, the more the tension. And in this case, you're putting the impact, that tension, in the setting. The second place you can add tension is in the characterization. Sometimes there's conflict between the characters. Sometimes the characters are just so different that there's a certain tension there. And I want to use the movie Hitch, starring Will Smith, as an example. In that movie, Will Smith is the love doctor. He has all the right looks, all the right words, all the right moves, and he hires himself out to people who want to get a certain date and they don't know how to do it. And so he shows them what to say, how to dress, and all of that. But the irony is, early in his life, early in his college career, he was dumped by a girl. And he doesn't really believe that he can have a long-term committed relationship. He doesn't go for it. He only goes for the short game. Well, one of his clients is Kevin James. He plays the part of Albert, and Albert is an utter klutz. He drips mustard on himself. He sprays Coca-Cola all over himself. He is wearing white sports socks and loafers with a business suit. And Albert is in love with the beautiful heiress, Allegra Cole. He can't get her. She doesn't even know he lives. So he hires Will Smith to teach him what to do. But the irony is, even though he is such a klutz, he is willing to give everything he has to gain the love of his life. He's willing to give everything. And so you have these characters who are very different, and they kind of run in conflict to each other. And when you have that, it adds a certain tension. So you've got the setting, you've got the characters. The third one is the plot. So if you were to make a graph of a story, you would start with the setting right here. And then, okay, so here's the setting. Then there's a point when the conflict happens. Something disrupts that setting and the conflict happens. And then from there, you have a plot line, and you want to, if possible, for the purposes of like a Toastmaster speech, accelerate, increase that conflict about 3 times. It's not a law written in stone. It merely works well. But if you can keep increasing the conflict as you go through the plot line, the storyline, until you get to the very climax, and then the story resolves. So let's go back and look at Apollo 13. I actually went back and watched the movie and took notes, and the conflict in there accelerates more than 20 times. I'm going to give you just a few examples, but basically everything that could go wrong went wrong. And here's what happened in that story. First, the engine goes out. Then the alarms go off, and you get that famous line, "Houston, we've got a problem." Then they find they're venting gas into space. They're running out of power. The CO2 level is toxic. They're approaching Earth at the wrong angle, and there is a tornado warning at the very edge of the entry zone. Not only that, is the heat shield still in place? No one really knows. And so you have the conflict increasing in the plot and creating quite a bit of tension and quite a bit of impact. Everybody's on the edge of their seat. What I want us to do tonight is an exercise. And I'm going to give you one story, but I'm going to give it to you twice. I'm going to give it to you the way I first heard it. Then I'm going to give it to you adding more impact to it, more conflict. And then you're going to tell me where I added the conflict, where I added the tension to improve the story. Okay? So the story is one that actually happened in our family. And the first version was as it was told to me by Bob right after the incident. Many of you know Bob. He does not give a lot of detail. He is very left-brained. And I never knew the rest of the story until much later. But this is the way Bob told me the story. Now, as it happened, our family was vacationing in Grand Tetons National Park. It was 11 years ago. And Bob and our youngest daughter, Amy, decided to take a hike. They got about halfway into this canyon and they got caught in a storm. On the way back, they turned around, and on the way back, Bob pulled a muscle and Amy was getting really cold. And so then they got back and the boat had been canceled because of the storm. So they had to walk around the lake. They were really cold, but they finally did make it back to the car. That's the story that I heard from Bob. I was going to use this story for a TLI workshop that I taught 3 years ago. So I thought, you know, why don't I ask Amy what her version of the story is? Oh my goodness, whole different version of the story. So here we go with the new and improved version. 11 years ago, my family and I were vacationing in Grand Tetons National Park. It had been a wonderful week and the weather had been beautiful. So midway through the week, Bob and our youngest daughter, Amy, decided to take a hike through Paintbrush Canyon. Bob was 60 years old at this point in time, and he was in pretty good shape for 60 years old. Amy was 27. Amy is our fitness guru. She is one solid hunk of muscle with a little bit of skin stretched over it and no body fat, none. So Bob and Amy were walking along. They'd always had this great relationship, but sometimes you don't know how good a relationship is, how strong it is, until it is tested. That day, they were just enjoying each other's company. The sky was blue, the clouds were white, and they made it about halfway into Paintbrush Canyon when all of a sudden they noticed the sky had gotten very dark. Not only that, the temperature had plummeted precipitously. On that day, Amy was wearing a pair of short shorts and one of those moisture wicking shirts. They work great when it's warm out, but that was all she had on at that point. They were walking along, and all of a sudden there is this lightning, it just in the sky, and no time between the lightning and the boom, lightning, boom, and they knew that storm was right upon them. They're looking around for shelter and there is nothing. So they just have to turn around and start going back. Well, on the way, they had been walking over these large river rocks. Not too hard, kind of a moderate hike. But as the rain began falling in large drops, it formed a thin layer of mud on the rocks. So they're going carefully, carefully. And all of a sudden, Bob slips and he pulls a muscle in his groin. Really painful. At first, it wasn't too bad. At first. So they kept going. But at this point, Amy's getting colder and colder. She's beginning to shiver because that moisture wicking shirt, it's great. On a warm day, it'll keep you nice and cool. But at this point, when she's drenched, it is sucking every bit of heat out of her body. And she is shaking, just shivering visibly. They kept going on, down, down, and finally made it to the mouth of the canyon. A little bit farther, and they made it to the boat dock, which is where you catch the boat to take you back across the lake. So they're standing in line, and now Amy's shaking has just gotten violent, to the point where a lady behind him taps on her shoulder. She says, "I'm from Wisconsin and you are getting hypothermia. Take my jacket." Amy said, I have a sweatshirt in my pack. I was trying to keep it dry, but I can't reach it. So of course, immediately Bob and the lady got the sweatshirt out. They put it over her head. And Bob at this point actually had to reach down and pull Amy's hand up through the arms of the sweatshirt, because her body was actually curling in on itself the way it does when you have hypothermia and your body is trying to conserve every last bit of body heat. So they got that on, and right then they get the announcement from the doc. "Sorry, folks, we just got orders. No more boats until the lightning stops." Well, immediately some of the people in line ahead of them just took off. They just said, "Hey, we're hoofing it back to the parking lot." It was about 2 miles walking around the lake. But Amy and Bob couldn't walk well. Neither of them could walk well at this point. And yet her shaking was getting worse and worse. They had to make a decision. Bob looked her in the eye and he says, "Amy, you go on without me." And Amy says to him, "No, Daddy, I'm not leaving you." Sometimes you don't know how strong a relationship is until it's tested. They had to come to some decision. They had to do something. They couldn't stand there. So what they decided was they would both go on at their own rate. Amy would try to keep her eye on the hikers who knew how to get to the parking lot. She did not know how to get there, but she could barely still see them in the distance, and keep her other eye on Bob, who was coming along behind her. They did make it. Amy, stiff-legged and armed, running like the Frankenstein monster, and Bob coming along behind, dragging one leg like Quasimodo. The first I knew about it was when I got the phone call from Amy from the car. It was the first time they'd had cell reception. And the call went like this: "Ma, we're okay. Daddy went to get hot chocolate." Okay, you're on. That's the story. How many, by a show of hands, and I can only see part of you on the screen, but by a show of hands, how many of you would say you like the first story better? Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Oh, even Bob didn't vote for it, my goodness. Okay, how many thought it is better with some impact? Okay, all right. Okay, so now you tell me, you can unmute yourselves to do this. And like I said, I can try calling on you, but I can't see about 3 people on the second screen. So where did I add the conflict, the tension? Okay, we always have a rule when Bob and I teach. If nobody answers, Bob has to answer first.
Well, here I am.
Oh, okay. All right. Art Douglas, good. Oh, excellent storyteller. Yes. Where does the tension get added? Where did we get this? Oh, Art,
you muted yourself again.
Yeah, Art, you are muted again.
Okay.
Okay.
In the character description, in the setting, in the plot,
be specific,
in the action that took place, in all those things, you made it so much, you added so much color, so much detail, so much emotion, so much tension.
Okay, give us some specific examples. Just one. Just one.
Just one. Your daughter's shivering.
Okay. Yeah, she's
It was,
shivering.
he said she got cold. You said she was shivering, and you even shivered yourself.
Okay.
Good vocal variety.
Okay, thank you. At first she was shivering visibly. She got to shivering violently too. So, okay. All right, Michael Osier.
Oh, I loved how you did the lightning and the thunder and the rain, the lightning. I mean, you even did a rhythm to it. And I was feeling it. I was feeling it and wanting to run really fast.
Okay, this is actually a lightning storm. It's very near Grand Tetons. It's Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So, yeah. Who else do we have? Okay, Jose.
Yes, you also covered the rocks with mud, which made it so hard for them to go over them.
Okay, yeah. They started out kind of a moderate hike. Now they are going over these slimy rocks.
You changed also the part about the boat and Bob just said that they canceled the boat rides and you added lightning and all those sorts of things that had that extra level of tension.
Okay, I think I saw Daryl Zeller.
Yeah, so with the having to put on the sweater and describe how Bob had to go ahead and pull her arms out for the sweater. Just using the jacket and the sweater completely.
Okay.
Angie's got her hand up, Rox.
Roxann.
Oh, yes, Marsha. Hi.
This is Marsha. Hi. I don't know. I feel that the Riverside Club here should, not say anything because we are all there in TOI. Here's the handouts that you have. So I feel like I'm cheating a little bit, but because this is the story you used to teach us that day. But I think now, I can see more of how your descriptive language, and like, for instance, when you start describing how beautiful the weather is, and then right after talking about how it changed, the temperature dropped, and, so the conflict there. But and the same thing with the wardrobe, Amy's wardrobe, that was for the son, and now, getting to be a problem for them. So all of this little conflicts they are building, and I think what it actually makes this work is the descriptive language that you use.
Okay.
That is, because you can almost feel it, that you were there. That's my take. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that's actually a whole other segment of storytelling. Somebody commented on it with Michael, but yeah, to have very specific descriptive words is a big bonus in storytelling. Angie. Hi, Angie.
Hi, Roxann. I'm a big note taker. In your first story, I took 6 words: Amy hiked, storm, pulled muscle, and cold. My notes for the second story: you described the setting very well, beautiful. You named the canyon. Then you went on to describe Bob, his shape, his age. You described Amy. We had a great vision of who Amy was: no fat, all muscle. You then talked about the relationship between the two. So that kind of tells me that later on you're going to bring up relationship again. You added more description on how they moved and why they moved that way. You also told us how they saw the storm come in and how they felt when the storm came in, which leads me to you bringing some emotion into it. You talked about fear and why it was hard to walk, what the problem was, and then another emotion, pain, and then to the struggle, and then some physical aspects that were not in the first story, hills and boats and docks. You added more about the setting, the Good Samaritan that came in. That adds a little bit more to the story, more physical. And then toward the end, you brought in that relationship strength, kind of the moral to the story, and how they were tested and brought it all back together. And with all of that, you also added many gestures, which enlivened the story. And I took 2.5 pages of notes on the second story.
You are a good note taker, my goodness.
Back to you.
I have to put in a good word for Bob on this. When he originally told me the story, that goes back 11 years ago, he has improved so much in the last 11 years. So his storytelling is way better, but back then it was pretty sparse. So anybody else? Okay, yes, Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi. I really liked the severity of the Good Samaritan, as Angie named her. You kind of leaned forward and said, the hypothermia, you're coming into, so that's like, I'm not just shaking, this is really dangerous. And so you really made that point. Your voice was very clear and firm. You leaned forward and it was like, oh yeah, I hope she makes it. My first time with this story. So excellent drama to really get our attention. I appreciated that.
Thank you. I'm going to go real quick to page 2 of the screen. And is there anybody on page 2 who has a comment? Oh, yes, Judy.
Well, I appreciated the story. The tension built up and reinforced each other. The pivotal moment came when he sprained his muscles, and I could see that's where a turn. The story was going to escalate. Bigger and more plot was building up.
Yeah.
And the ending was superb, where there was a beautiful ending where nobody died, and the tension conflict resolved. It was that they lived happily ever after.
Good. Yeah, there was actually a point after Bob pulled his muscle that Amy told me, I didn't include this in the story. Amy weighs about 125 pounds. She's like, I was thinking, could I carry my father out of the canyon if I needed to? Because he was hurting there. But okay, well, let me just wrap up here. Tension makes the story. Tension adds the impact. You see the tension in the setting, in the characters, and in the plot. So when you think of your signature story, remember I told you to think of that story that you tell and retell. Where are you going to add the tension, Mr. Toastmaster?
This another great presentation by a QS, and I had to bring up the point that the Andersens, Bob and Roxann, are the only other married couple who both are QSs. So that's a claim to fame. Hopefully one of the spouses of one of our other QSs will break into that club. Huh?
The Lucases?
Oh, they're the Lucases. I forgot that, right. So we have Karen and Mark, so that's pretty special. And we have a visiting QS from District 100 who I'm hoping will end up going for his QS in District 12, David Flores. So welcome to have you here. He has spoken before this group, and I'm glad to see him coming to visit us. We have a number of things to mention before we close. I'm sure maybe Jose might have some announcements to make, and I want to mention that next month is November, I wrote it down somewhere, November the 4th. And at this point, we do have room for someone to seek their QS, and we are looking for one of our qualified speakers to give a better speaker series, as it's kind of our habit that we have been doing that. The thing we can look forward to in December is a pattern we're beginning to develop, and with the lack of a humorous contest, the spring contest is international and evaluation. And so we're trying to take the place of the absence of tall tales and humorous, so we'll try to do a tall tales and humorous, and you will get trophies. I must admit they will be recycled trophies, but we will have a vote for the best humorous and best tall tales in December, so let me know as soon as you know that you would like to compete. And we have not limited that only to QSs, so any Toastmaster who thinks they have a humorous presentation they would like to make, we'd like to invite. I could mention that David I found out he was competing in a contest in Canada. He joined a club in Vancouver. Is it Vancouver? I'm not sure.
Oh, Dan.
Dan
Magill.
McGill was competing, and I didn't get a chance to find out how he did, but he was going to compete in humorous in that district in Canada. We have, let's see, I want to make sure. Oh, yeah, the big thing is, and Bob, maybe you want to talk about it. You can talk about your program better than I can. I did send out a contact for the propositions that you'll be doing this Sunday at 1 in the afternoon, and all are invited, and I can personally give testimony that I have seen you do it before, and you have your positions on the issues, but you make sure you give it in an unbiased manner. We are much more informed about how to vote on those 15 propositions than the average bear that goes in and votes. And so, Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about what this
Sunday at 2 o'clock, you can either come in person, but if you come in person, you need to make sure your temperature is right and you will get tested, or you can come online. If you come online, you don't even have to register. Just click on the link. It's on magonline.com. Apparently it's not. Just tell Roxann and she'll figure out how to get you on it. But there are 12 ballot propositions. I spend most of my time going through the ballot propositions to explain them. So I do give my opinion because some of the people who come want to hear it, but you will know whether you agree or disagree with me by the time I get there. So you're welcome to come. I think you'll know how you want to vote on the ballot propositions by the end of it's about 2 hours from 2 till 4, about 10 minutes per proposition.
If I can just, if I can give you the links.
This is out doing things. Go ahead, Roxann.
Yeah, if I can just give you the links. If you want to come in person, you need to reserve a seat. There are only 100 seats because we need to space out. And so the link to come in person to register for a seat is magonline.com/vote. And that'll take you to the registration form. If you just want to come online, which is fine, then you go to live.magonline.com. And I think that Tom had those in a flyer.
Again, Connie's writing it down, so
Okay, the registration for a seat is magonline.com/vote. And the link to just watch online is live.magonline.com.
Why? The letter y.magonline.com.
Didn't you say live, L-I-V-E? Was it Y or L-I-V-E? I think it's L-I-V-E, not Y, but live.
Okay, this one is live.
I just posted the chat too for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, so glad that you're doing that and providing that service for the community and representing Toastmasters and doing the things that qualified speakers should be doing, is sharing their skills and knowledge with the community. And so that's a good thing all the way around. Part of our dual responsibility of being responsible to the district, as the district should be responsible to the Speakers Bureau. I do have another announcement, but I want to get to Jose and have him make his announcements before we close. We know that I'm looking for some volunteers for next month and looking for some humorous and tall tales for the month of December. And there will be people around to advise you. If you don't know what a tall tales is, we can make sure you get the ballot or get some explanation about how to do a tall tales. We have numbers of people who have done it a lot. So Jose, are you there to make an announcement?
I am, and thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to share a couple of things. If you were not at our Pathways celebration on Saturday, you missed a really awesome event. It was great. We had, it was put together by Suzanne Leonard and her team. and they did an outstanding job. We presented 161 pins to people that advance on pathways. That is besides all the new people that joined Toastmasters in the last 3 months. It was really, really awesome. So check on Tuesday with the Trio for all the upcoming events. I know we are having a Train the Trainer coming up in the next couple of weeks. So look up at Tuesday with the Trio or go on, I'm not quite sure if they're on the website yet, but I know they are on Facebook, Tuesday with the Trio. And if you need more information, reach out to Suzanne or myself. There's been a few things we've done in this last month that were really, came out really good. One was our business meeting, and we had quorum, and so all of our reports are done for the district. We're all good. So things are looking up. We do, and I'm asking everyone to help us reach out, because our membership this time around is not as strong as it should be, in my opinion. But please help us out, and that's about all I have. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Speakers Bureau, and we will see you on the next event. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jose. I know that something is coming down the pipe, whatever it is. Anyway, Melissa Stayskull is going to be working on trying to get some of our QSs to visit clubs, right, Jose? And we'll be hearing about where we'll be encouraged to go out and share the wealth and help stimulate some of those clubs and provide some programs. So we will be hearing a little bit more about that in the next few weeks. So hopefully you'll become available, and you'll be letting me know if you're out doing things. As I mentioned, we have I've been in contact with a Kiwanis Club. Suzanne Ali will be speaking at the next one. I think Ryan Odman will be speaking at the first one in November, and Michael will be speaking one of these times at that Kiwanis Club. And so we'll be finding some programs. She was very happy to find out about those possibilities. And I don't want to leave on this, so I want to hear from, I see there's some people that I don't recognize their names. Maybe if I saw their faces, I might. Just at a typical Toastmaster meeting, we always ask the guests, and so it is unheard of that I am going to have time to end this meeting and not be overtime. So are there any comments from any of our guests in the audience? And we'll start first with, this is your first meeting. I'd like to hear from you first. I'm not seeing anybody volunteer yet, but is there anybody else that would have a comment before we close this meeting? Okay, well, we will, glad that you are here. We're always glad to have an audience and glad to have people come, and invite your other members to come if you did like the meeting. And I must leave you with a little sad announcement. A little over a week ago on Thursday, about 2 weeks from tomorrow, we lost a former chair of the Speakers Bureau, the person who was most responsible for getting Speakers Bureau up and running again about 10 years ago or so. And Jack Cantola from Club 1348, a person I have known for nearly 40 years, was passed away after a long battle with cancer. And so we definitely will miss him, and most miss him in Club 1348, but he made many contributions to the district, including helping to start our Speakers Bureau and getting rolling with Carlos Villarezo. So with that, we will see you in November, and thank you all for being here. And I appreciate the speakers and the QS candidates, and of course, our featured speaker, Roxann. And we'll see you in a month.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
Hey, if you need somebody, I'd be interested next month if you need somebody.
Well, you just got the job.
Okay.
You get to choose whichever one. I mean, I don't even worry about whether somebody has done them before, because they'll be far enough apart. So if you want to choose your
I'm actually, if I could have an open topic, that would be great. I think I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I was telling you guys about at Coffee and Toastmasters about the house off the grid and everything. I was going to talk a little bit about that process.
That sounds exciting, and I'm looking forward to, after you're there, to getting an.
Oh, I think I just lost him.